In the glittering world of tech entrepreneurs and Hollywood stars, sometimes the most unexpected encounters can lead to the most dramatic showdowns. Comment where you're watching from today, as we dive into a story that shocked both Silicon Valley and Hollywood alike. It was meant to be a routine press conference at the Trump Tower in Manhattan. The marble-laden lobby buzzed with anticipation as Michael Crawford, one of Silicon Valley's most outspoken critics, prepared to deliver what he promised would be a groundbreaking revelation about the future of technology and social media. The air was thick with tension as journalists from every major network jostled for position, their cameras trained on the ornate podium. Among the crowd, wearing his signature black-fitted suit, Jason Statham stood silently near the back, his presence yet unnoticed by the gathering media circus. He had received a text message earlier that morning from his longtime friend Elon Musk, containing only a link to a cryptic social media post and the words, "Watch this one carefully, Kate." At precisely 2 p.m., Michael Crawford stepped up to the microphone, flanked by Thomas Gutierrez and Robert Manning, two prominent tech investors known for their aggressive stance against innovative startups. The trio exuded confidence as they surveyed the packed room, unaware of the storm brewing in their midst. "Ladies and gentlemen," Crawford began, his voice carrying an air of self-importance that made Statham's jaw clench imperceptibly. "We're here today to address a growing concern in the tech industry, the unchecked influence of certain individuals who believe their wealth gives them the right to experiment with humanity's future." The crowd murmured as Crawford continued, his words becoming increasingly pointed. "Just last week, we witnessed yet another example of this reckless behavior. The son of a certain tech mogul, barely old enough to understand the world, has become the subject of his father's latest technological experiment." Jason's eyes narrowed as Crawford pulled up a series of slides, each one more sensational than the last. The presentation detailed supposed insider information about advanced neural implant testing, with implications that made even the most seasoned journalists shift uncomfortably in their seats. "What we're seeing here," Crawford declared, his voice rising with theatrical indignation, "is nothing short of technological child abuse. When a father values his vision of the future more than his own child's natural development, we must ask ourselves, where do we draw the line?" The room had grown so quiet you could hear the gentle hum of the air conditioning. Statham took a step forward, his movement drawing the attention of Sarah Phillips, a veteran reporter who recognized him immediately. Her eyes widened as she watched him navigate through the crowd with deliberate precision. Crawford, oblivious to the approaching storm, was hitting his stride. "And let me be clear, this isn't just about one child. This is about setting a precedent that could affect generations to come. We cannot allow the children of Silicon Valley to become unwitting test subjects in their parents' technological fantasies." That's when Jason Statham cleared his throat, the sound cutting through the tension like a knife. The crowd parted instinctively, creating a clear path between him and the podium. Crawford paused mid-sentence, finally noticing the formidable figure standing just yards away. "Interesting presentation," Statham said, his British accent carrying clearly across the now silent room. "But I've got a few questions about your sources, if you don't mind." Crawford's confident demeanor flickered for a moment before he recovered, attempting to dismiss the interruption with a wave of his hand. "This is a closed press conference, sir. Security will be happy to escort you out." Statham smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, I don't think they will. You see, I've got something rather important to add to your little presentation. Something about the actual truth, if you're interested in that sort of thing." The action star pulled out his phone, displaying a series of text messages and documents that made Crawford's face pale visibly. "These are the real records of the medical innovations you're so concerned about. Fully approved, ethically tested, and designed to help thousands of children with neurological conditions." But that wouldn't make for such a dramatic press conference, would it? Crawford's colleagues began to shift nervously as Statham continued, his voice growing harder with each word. "You know what I find interesting? How quickly some people are willing to use a child, any child, to further their own agenda. Now that's what I'd call abuse." The room erupted in a flurry of camera flashes as journalists realized they were witnessing a much bigger story than they'd anticipated. Crawford attempted to regain control, but his voice had lost its authority. This is a private matter that. Private? Statham interrupted, now standing directly in front of the podium. You just made it very public, mate. So let's talk about privacy. Let's talk about how you've been secretly funding a disinformation campaign against multiple tech innovators while privately investing in competing companies. The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled press corps. Michelle Flores, a tech journalist from a leading digital publication, was already furiously typing on her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she documented every word. But here's what really got my attention, Statham continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet that somehow commanded even more attention. You didn't just attack a businessman or his innovations. You chose to target a child. And that's something I take personally. Crawford's security team moved forward, but one look from Statham made them reconsider their approach. The action star's reputation for both on-screen and real-life martial arts expertise was well known, and none of them seemed eager to test it firsthand. I'm going to make this very simple, Statham announced, addressing not just Crawford but the entire room. In about 5 minutes, every journalist here will receive a detailed dossier showing exactly how you've manipulated data, fabricated sources, and violated multiple ethical guidelines in your crusade against technological innovation. He turned to face the cameras directly, his expression intense. But more importantly, they'll see how you've used children, including your own former employees' kids, as pawns in your corporate games. Now that's a story worth reporting, don't you think? The silence that followed was deafening. Crawford's colleagues had already begun inching away from the podium, desperate to distance themselves from the impending scandal. Thomas Gutierrez was already on his phone, likely calling his lawyer, while Robert Manning had simply disappeared into the crowd. Mr. Statham, called out Jennifer Woods, a respected technology correspondent, are you saying you have evidence of systematic manipulation of medical data? Evidence. Statham replied, a grim smile playing at his lips. I've got something better than evidence. I've got truth. And unlike Mr. Crawford here, I'm not afraid to face it head-on. What happened next would be talked about in tech circles for months to come. Crawford, in a desperate attempt to salvage the situation, tried to claim that Statham was part of a coordinated attack on traditional values in technology. The action star's response was both unexpected and devastating. Traditional values? Statham repeated, his voice carrying a weight that silenced the room once again. Let me tell you about values. I grew up on the streets of London, where your word was everything. Where you protected those who couldn't protect themselves. Where you faced your opponents eye to eye, not by hiding behind press releases and manufactured outrage. He turned to address the crowd directly, his presence commanding complete attention. Every parent in this room knows that children aren't pawns in some corporate game. They're our future. And when someone tries to use them as weapons in their personal vendetta, they've crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. The impact was immediate and devastating. Social media exploded with clips of the confrontation, with hashtags #Statham Showdown and #TechTruth trending within minutes. Crawford's carefully orchestrated press conference had transformed into a public relations nightmare, but more importantly, it had exposed a darker side of tech industry politics that few had dared to address. As security finally began clearing the room, Statham received another text message. This one simply read, "Thanks, mate. Some fights need more than just tweets." The aftermath would reshape conversations about technology, ethics, and the responsibility of power for months to come. But perhaps more significantly, it reminded everyone that in a world of careful PR statements and managed appearances, sometimes it takes an unexpected warrior to stand up for what's right. Let us know in the comments. When was the last time you saw someone stand up against bullying and manipulation? Share your stories of everyday heroes who weren't afraid to speak truth to power. Remember to like and subscribe for more real stories about people who aren't afraid to stand up for what's right, even when the odds are stacked against them. Next time, we'll reveal what happened after the cameras stopped rolling and how this confrontation changed the tech industry forever. The aftermath of Jason Statham's confrontation at Trump Tower sent shockwaves through both Silicon Valley and Hollywood, but what happened next would reveal an even darker conspiracy that no one saw coming. As the dust settled from the initial showdown, a complex web of deception began to unravel, exposing a plot that went far beyond simple corporate rivalry. In the hours following the press conference, Michael Crawford retreated to his penthouse office at the Crawford Tech headquarters, accompanied by his closest advisors, including security chief Marcus Bailey and legal counsel Rachel Hall. The normally imposing view of the Manhattan skyline did little to calm his nerves as reports of the confrontation dominated every major news network. What Crawford didn't know was that Jason Statham hadn't acted alone. In fact, the action star's dramatic intervention was just the first move in a carefully orchestrated plan to expose a years-long campaign of technological sabotage and corporate espionage. Behind the scenes, a coalition of unlikely allies had been gathering evidence, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Dr. Sarah Martinez, a leading researcher in pediatric neurology, had been the first to notice something amiss in Crawford's crusade against technological innovation. Working late one night in her lab at the prestigious Madison Research Institute, she discovered discrepancies in the data Crawford had used to support his claims. The numbers didn't just fail to add up, they told a completely different story. The implications were staggering, Dr. Martinez would later reveal in a detailed exposé. Crawford's team hadn't just manipulated the data, they had systematically reversed positive outcomes to create a narrative of danger and reckless experimentation. They took success stories of children helped by revolutionary treatments and twisted them into cautionary tales. Meanwhile, across town, investigative journalist Christopher Watson had been pursuing his own leads. For months, he had been tracking suspicious patterns in technology investment firms, all leading back to a shadowy organization called the Traditional Technologies Foundation. On the surface, it appeared to be a conservative think tank advocating for responsible innovation. In reality, it was a front for something far more sinister. Jason Statham, having left Trump Tower, met with Watson at an unmarked office in Brooklyn. The reporter had assembled a wall of evidence that would make any conspiracy theorist proud, except every connection was backed by solid documentation. Photos, financial records, and encrypted communications painted a picture of a coordinated effort to undermine specific tech companies while profiting from their competitors. "Look at this," Watson said, pointing to a series of transactions. Every time Crawford makes a public statement against a company, these shell corporations short their stock. They've made billions betting against innovation, all while claiming to protect the public interest. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Jennifer Chen, a former software engineer at Crawford Tech, had been quietly collecting evidence of her own. She had witnessed firsthand how Crawford's organization had attempted to sabotage legitimate research into neural interface technology, particularly projects aimed at helping children with severe neurological conditions. Chen had reached out to Statham through a mutual connection in the tech world, providing him with the crucial documentation he had used during the confrontation. But what she revealed next would prove even more explosive. Crawford's campaign wasn't just about money, she explained in a secured video call. It was about control. They wanted to ensure that certain technologies would only be available to a select few, those who could be trusted to use them responsibly. The plot thickened when Alexander Harrington, a senior executive at a rival tech company, came forward with additional evidence. He had been approached by Crawford's associates with an offer he couldn't refuse, or so they thought. They wanted us to deliberately release flawed versions of our neural interface products, Harrington revealed. The plan was to create public distrust while they developed their own, safe alternatives. As these revelations began to surface, Crawford's empire started to crumble. His closest allies, sensing the shifting winds, began to distance themselves. Thomas Gutierrez, who had stood beside him at the press conference, was now cooperating with federal investigators. Robert Manning had fled the country, leaving a trail of incriminating documents in his wake. Jason Statham, working with a team that now included Dr. Martinez, Watson, Chen, and others, prepared to release the full scope of their findings. But Crawford wasn't going down without a fight. In a desperate move, he scheduled another press conference, this time at his own headquarters. "The accusations against me are part of a coordinated attack by those who fear true innovation," Crawford declared to a significantly smaller crowd of reporters. My concerns about unchecked technological experimentation are shared by many responsible leaders in our industry. But even as he spoke, his words were being undermined by a flood of evidence being released online. Michelle Flores, the tech journalist who had witnessed the original confrontation, was now publishing a comprehensive investigation that included testimonies from former employees, medical experts, and affected families. The most damaging revelation came from Dr. William Parker, a renowned ethicist who had served on Crawford's advisory board. "I resigned when I realized that their ethical guidelines were a facade," Parker stated in a video that quickly went viral. "They weren't protecting children. They were protecting their own interests while denying crucial medical advances to those who needed them most." Jason Statham, watching Crawford's desperate attempt at damage control from a secure location, received another message from Elon Musk. "Phase 2 is ready. Time to show them what real innovation looks like." The action star's next move would prove even more dramatic than his first intervention. During Crawford's press conference, every screen in the building suddenly switched to a live feed showing successful cases of neural interface technology helping children with severe disabilities. Parents testified about miraculous improvements in their children's lives, while medical professionals provided data that definitively debunked Crawford's claims. "You wanted to talk about children?" Statham's voice boomed through the building's speaker system. "Let's talk about the thousands of kids who could have been helped if you hadn't blocked these treatments. Let's talk about the families who had to watch their children suffer while you played your political games." The impact was devastating. Crawford's remaining supporters watched in shock as years of carefully constructed narratives crumbled in minutes. But the most dramatic moment was yet to come. As Crawford attempted to flee the podium, he was confronted by a group of parents led by Angela Thompson, whose daughter had been denied experimental treatment due to his campaign of misinformation. "My daughter could have walked by now," Thompson declared, her voice carrying across the stunned room. "She could have spoken her first words. But your lies made that impossible. How do you sleep at night?" The security team, led by Marcus Bailey, made no move to intervene. In fact, Bailey himself stepped forward with a flash drive containing even more incriminating evidence. "I can't be part of this anymore," he announced, handing the drive to a nearby FBI agent who had been monitoring the situation. As Crawford was led away by federal authorities, Jason Statham emerged from the crowd once again. This time, he wasn't alone. Beside him stood Dr. Sarah Martinez, Jennifer Chin, and a group of children who had benefited from the very technologies Crawford had tried to suppress. "The future isn't something to be feared," Statham declared, his voice carrying the weight of victory. "It's something to be embraced, especially when it has the power to help those who need it most. The real crime isn't innovation, it's denying hope to those who deserve it." The story dominated headlines for weeks, leading to major reforms in how technological innovations were evaluated and regulated. Crawford's empire continued to unravel, revealing connections to other organizations that had profited from suppressing medical advances. But perhaps the most significant change was in public perception. As one young patient put it in a viral video, "They tried to make people afraid of the future. But the future is what gave me my voice back." The question now on everyone's mind was, what would Jason Statham's next move be? With Crawford's organization exposed, attention turned to other tech companies that had been quietly following similar practices. The action star had proven himself to be more than just a Hollywood tough guy. He had become a powerful advocate for technological progress and ethical innovation. Let us know in the comments. Have you or someone you know been affected by restrictive medical policies? Share your stories of hope and the importance of making advanced treatments available to those who need them most. Stay tuned for our next chapter, where we'll reveal how this conspiracy led straight to the highest levels of corporate power and how one man's stand for truth sparked a revolution in technological innovation. The exposure of Crawford's conspiracy was just the tip of the iceberg. As Jason Statham and his allies dug deeper into the web of corruption, they uncovered a truth that would shake the foundations of the tech industry. What began as one man's stand against misinformation had evolved into a battle for the very future of technological innovation. In the wake of Crawford's arrest, focus shifted to a mysterious organization known as the Global Technology Regulatory Alliance, or GTRA. On paper, it appeared to be a legitimate international oversight body. However, investigative journalist Christopher Watson had discovered disturbing connections between the GTRA and a network of companies actively suppressing breakthrough technologies. Dr. Elizabeth Armstrong, a renowned AI ethics researcher, had been quietly gathering evidence against the GTRA for months. Working from her secured laboratory at the Cambridge Institute of Technology, she had compiled a devastating dossier of corruption, manipulation, and deliberate sabotage of promising medical innovations. The GTRA isn't just controlling technology, she explained to Statham during a confidential meeting. They're deciding who gets to benefit from it. And their criteria have nothing to do with ethics or safety. The alliance between Hollywood's most famous action star and the academic world raised eyebrows, but it proved devastatingly effective. While Dr. Armstrong provided the intellectual firepower, Statham brought something equally valuable: the ability to make complex technical issues accessible to the public and the courage to face powerful enemies head-on. Their investigation led them to Richard Maxwell, CEO of Maxtech Industries and the shadowy figure behind much of the GTRA's activities. Maxwell had built his empire by positioning himself as a champion of responsible innovation, but his definition of responsibility seemed to mainly involve maintaining his own power and profit. Jason Statham's confrontation with Maxwell would come sooner than expected. During a high-profile tech conference in Singapore, Maxwell was scheduled to deliver a keynote address about the dangers of unrestricted technological advancement. What he didn't know was that Statham and his team had prepared a surprise of their own. As Maxwell approached the podium, screens throughout the convention center suddenly came to life with a devastating presentation. Evidence of Maxtech's involvement in suppressing life-saving medical technologies, manipulating research data, and threatening whistleblowers played out before a stunned audience of industry leaders and journalists. Ladies and gentlemen, Statham's voice rang out as he emerged from the crowd. Mr. Maxwell would like you to believe that he's protecting you from dangerous innovation. But the real danger isn't in the technology, it's in the hands of those who would deny it to those in need. Maxwell attempted to maintain his composure, but the evidence was overwhelming. Documents revealed that Maxtech had deliberately buried research showing the success of neural interface technologies in treating various neurological conditions. They had even gone so far as to bribe officials to delay approval of promising treatments. The most damaging revelation came from Dr. Sarah Martinez, who had discovered that Maxwell's own company was secretly developing similar technologies while publicly condemning them. They weren't opposed to the technology, she declared to the shocked audience. They just wanted to control who had access to it. As security personnel moved to escort Maxwell from the stage, Jason Statham revealed his trump card. Before anyone tries to shut this down, he announced, you should know that this presentation is being broadcast live to every major news network and social media platform globally. The truth is out, and it can't be buried again. The impact was seismic. Within hours, Maxtech's stock price plummeted, and calls for investigation came from regulatory bodies worldwide. But the real story was just beginning to unfold. Jennifer Chin, the whistleblower from Crawford Tech, had discovered links between Maxwell's organization and a network of supposedly independent research institutions. They created an elaborate facade, Chin explained in a viral video interview. These institutions would publish papers questioning the safety of new technologies, creating doubt and fear in the public mind. Meanwhile, Maxwell's companies would position themselves as the safe alternative, charging premium prices for restricted access to the very innovations they had helped suppress. The human cost of this manipulation became clear as families began coming forward with their stories. Michael and Rebecca Thompson shared how their daughter had been denied access to experimental treatment due to Maxwell's interference. We were told the technology wasn't ready, Rebecca testified, but now we know it was ready, they just didn't want it in the hands of ordinary people. Jason Statham, working closely with Dr. Armstrong and a growing network of allies, began systematically exposing the full scope of the conspiracy. They revealed how the GTRA had created a two-tiered system of technological access, one for the wealthy and connected, and another for everyone else. The action star's presence brought unprecedented attention to these complex issues. His ability to break down technical concepts into compelling narratives helped the public understand what was at stake. "This isn't about politics or profit," he explained during a powerful interview. "It's about human dignity. It's about giving people access to technologies that could change their lives." Maxwell's empire continued to crumble as more evidence emerged. His closest associates, sensing the shifting tide, began turning on him. Thomas Gregory, Maxteca's former chief technology officer, provided devastating testimony about the company's systematic suppression of breakthrough technologies. "We had working prototypes of neural interfaces that could help children with severe disabilities," Gregory revealed. But Maxwell ordered them shelved because they didn't fit his controlled release strategy. He wanted to create artificial scarcity to drive up prices. The revelation that sparked the most public outrage came from an unexpected source. Dr. William Parker, who had exposed Crawford's ethical violations, discovered that Maxwell's organization had actively worked to prevent research into treatments for rare diseases. If the potential market wasn't big enough, Parker explained, they would ensure the technology never saw the light of day. Jason Statham's response was characteristically direct. During a packed press conference, he announced the formation of the Open Technology Initiative, a coalition of researchers, tech companies, and advocacy groups committed to making advanced medical technologies accessible to all who needed them. "The future of human health and potential shouldn't be controlled by a select few," he declared. "Innovation isn't a privilege, it's a right. And we're going to ensure that right is protected." The initiative quickly gained support from unexpected quarters. Several major tech companies, seeking to distance themselves from Maxwell's toxic legacy, pledged to make their research more transparent and accessible. Even some former GTRA members began cooperating with investigators, revealing the full extent of the organization's manipulation. But Maxwell wasn't finished. As his public empire crumbled, he retreated to his private compound, surrounded by loyal security forces and an army of lawyers. Reports suggested he was preparing to release damaging information about his opponents, including Statham and his allies. The stage was set for a final confrontation that would determine the future of technological innovation. As Jason Statham and his team prepared for Maxwell's counterattack, they knew the stakes couldn't be higher. This wasn't just about exposing corruption, it was about ensuring that life-changing technologies would be available to all who needed them. Share in the comments. Have you ever witnessed someone standing up against powerful interests to protect others? What gave them the courage to take that stand? Stay tuned for our next chapter, where we'll reveal the dramatic showdown between Jason Statham and the architects of this massive conspiracy, and how one man's determination to expose the truth led to a revolution in how we think about technological progress and human potential. The time had come for the final confrontation. As Maxwell barricaded himself in his high-tech compound outside Seattle, Jason Statham and his allies prepared for what would become the most dramatic showdown in recent tech history. The stakes weren't just about corporate power anymore, they were about the future of human innovation itself. Maxwell's fortress-like headquarters, a gleaming structure of glass and steel nestled in the Pacific Northwest forest, had transformed into a digital battleground. Inside, the disgraced tech mogul had assembled what he called his contingency team, a group of elite hackers and corporate mercenaries led by the notorious cybersecurity expert, Marcus Sterling. What Maxwell didn't know was that Jason Statham's team had already infiltrated his inner circle. Jennifer Chen, working with Dr. Sarah Martinez, had planted crucial evidence-gathering software throughout Maxwell's networks during the chaos following the Singapore revelation. Every desperate move he made was being monitored and documented. "He's preparing something big," Chen reported during an emergency meeting at the Open Technology Initiative's temporary headquarters. Maxwell's team is accessing archived files from every major tech company he's ever worked with. He's planning to take everyone down with him. Statham, standing at the window overlooking the Seattle skyline, remained characteristically calm. "Then we'll have to move faster," he declared. "How long until the neural interface trials are ready?" Dr. Elizabeth Armstrong, who had been coordinating with medical teams worldwide, pulled up the latest data on her secure tablet. "We have confirmed successful treatments in over 200 cases. Children who were told they'd never walk are taking their first steps. Patients who couldn't communicate are speaking to their families for the first time. The evidence was overwhelming, but Maxwell had one last card to play. His team had begun leaking carefully edited documents suggesting that the successful treatments were fabricated. Social media was flooding with conspiracy theories, and some news outlets were already beginning to question the legitimacy of the breakthrough technologies. That's when Statham revealed his own surprise. Working with Dr. William Parker, they had been documenting every successful treatment with unprecedented transparency. Every procedure, every result, every patient's progress had been recorded and verified by independent observers. Maxwell wants to play with information? Statham asked, his voice carrying the quiet confidence that had become his trademark. Let's show him what real transparency looks like. The next morning, as Maxwell prepared to release his manufactured evidence, every major news network simultaneously received a comprehensive database of successful neural interface treatments. But it wasn't just clinical data, it was stories. Real people, real families, real transformations. Among them was the story of Emily Turner, a 7-year-old who had been denied treatment under Maxwell's restricted access policies. Now, thanks to the Open Technology Initiative, she was not only walking but dancing. Her father, Michael Turner, had recorded a powerful message. They told us to wait for approved treatments. They told us to trust the system. But the system wasn't protecting us, it was protecting their profits. Maxwell's response was swift and desperate. He announced an emergency press conference from his compound, promising to reveal the true agenda behind Statham's campaign. But as he stepped up to the podium, surrounded by his remaining loyal supporters, something unexpected happened. Marcus Sterling, his head of security, stepped forward with a flash drive. "I can't do this anymore," he announced, his voice carrying across the stunned room. "Everything you're about to hear is a lie. And I can prove it." The flash drive contained years of internal communications showing how Maxwell had systematically worked to suppress technologies that could have helped millions. But more damaging were the videos, recordings of Maxwell himself ordering the destruction of promising research, threatening scientists who opposed him, and bragging about how he controlled access to life-changing innovations. As the evidence played on screens throughout the compound, Jason Statham made his final move. Walking calmly through the front doors, accompanied by federal agents and international technology crime investigators, he approached the podium where Maxwell stood frozen. "You know what the real crime is?" Statham asked, his voice carrying the weight of every family that had been denied hope. "It's not just the lies or the manipulation. It's the arrogance of thinking you had the right to decide who deserves a better life." Maxwell, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him, made one last desperate attempt to justify his actions. "You don't understand the responsibility," he shouted. "These technologies need to be controlled, regulated." "No," Statham replied, as families who had benefited from the newly released treatments began streaming into the room. "They need to be shared. They need to be accessible. They need to be in the hands of people who will use them to make the world better, not just richer." The scene that followed would be remembered as a turning point in the history of technological innovation. Parents carried children who had recently gained the ability to walk. Patients who had been given back the power of speech shared their stories. Scientists who had been silenced finally had the chance to reveal their breakthroughs. Dr. Sarah Martinez, standing beside a young patient who had recently completed successful treatment, addressed the gathered press. "This is what innovation looks like when it's driven by compassion instead of control. These aren't just medical procedures, they're restored hopes, restored dreams, restored lives." As federal agents led Maxwell away, Jason Statham turned to address the cameras one final time. "Today isn't about winning or losing," he declared. "It's about remembering why we create technology in the first place. It's not for power or profit, it's to make life better for everyone, not just a chosen few." The aftermath of the confrontation would reshape the tech industry forever. The Open Technology Initiative, supported by a coalition of ethical companies and researchers, established new standards for transparency and accessibility in medical innovation. The two-tiered system that had restricted access to breakthrough technologies was dismantled, replaced by a framework that prioritized need over wealth. Jennifer Chen, working with Dr. Armstrong and a team of dedicated researchers, helped create a global database of treatment options and success stories. "We're not just sharing technology," she explained in a viral interview. "We're sharing hope." The most powerful moment came weeks later, during a special ceremony at a children's hospital. Jason Statham, standing beside Elon Musk and a group of pioneering scientists, watched as a young girl named Sophie, who had been told she would never speak, used her neural interface to address the crowd. "They tried to make us wait," she said, her digitally assisted voice clear and strong. "But some things shouldn't wait. Some things, like hope and healing, belong to everyone." Maxwell's empire had fallen, but something far more valuable had risen in its place: a new understanding of what technology could achieve when driven by compassion instead of greed. The barriers that had kept life-changing innovations out of reach for so many were finally coming down. As Jason Statham prepared to leave the ceremony, a reporter asked him what he planned to do next. His response would be quoted for years to come. "This was never about one fight or one victory. It's about making sure that every breakthrough, every innovation, every possibility for healing and hope is available to everyone who needs it. That's not just a goal, it's a promise." Share in the comments. What innovations do you think should be made more accessible to those who need them? How can we ensure that technology serves humanity rather than controlling it? Remember to like and subscribe for more stories about those who dare to stand up against injustice.